This book is 5 years in the making. And Melissa and I first started talking about this anthology because we both have a common interest about Philippine mythology. And for me, it's the aswang. And it was great that Jaime talked about the aswang, and I grew up hearing those stories. And I want to read a blog post just an excerpt that Melissa Sipin wrote for Quali Journal, and this is going to be published, but it's about our process. The title is Naming Lost Things on Excavating New Philippine Myths, and news in quotes. Back in 2011, Kuwento Lost Things began as a search, an obsession, a need to excavate the stories of anitos, deities, and encantos, spirits our families once told us. When co-editor Rachel Cruz and I first indulged in the idea of curating an anthology on Philippine myths, we were struck at how diverse and varied our retellings were. Was the aswang a bat-like vampire woman, or was she a shape-shifting beast, or a giant black bird with a long fetus-eating tongue? That's my favorite version of her. We understood that the stories passed on to us from our fathers and mothers were varied, but also culturally inherited. It was as if our bodies knew them and knew them well. As Cristina Pantoja Hidalgo said, though the body of tales being produced today remains small, the tales themselves are extraordinarily varied. And that's from New Tales for Old. We found that the anthology's essence hinged on what our parents, our ancestors naturally performed for us at our bedtimes, at the dinner table, during our childhood years, telling us a story. We wanted to emphasize that this collection of Philippine myths was an inclination towards storytelling, of retelling, of reshifting stories of lore in modern times, an activity that all families, all cultures participate in. This sentiment, this passing of knowledge, of culture, of reimagined self was encompassed in the word cuento, the Tagalog word for story. We first sought to reclaim old myths from our cultural heritage. However, through the organic process of curation, both within and without the homeland and the diaspora, we found that many of our contributors are doing so much more than reclaiming. They were making anew what was once lost. It is better said by Elaine Castillo, whose powerful voice ends our anthology with her universally haunting and desperate predicament. The Philippine mythology I came across thought the San Telmo was the lost soul, the one drowned in the sea, aided by no one, the one who died before her time, and thereafter spent eternity enticing others into similar untimely deaths. The only thing I still can't figure out is if I'm the San Telmo herself, the one lost, the one whose history works just like a horror story, the one whose vengeful flesh will be broken down, denatured, and then maybe preserved. Or if I'm the witness, the one being pursued by the San Telmo, the one full of questions, the one whose faith isn't always strong enough, the one who travels alone, the one who reaches for the bitter charm, the one at risk, the one who still might have a chance. And tonight we have an amazing lineup of writers. We have David Maduli, Veronica Montez, Barbara Jane Reyes, M.G. Roberts, and Amy Suzara. My name is Rachel Cruz, and I am co-editor of Kuwento Lost Things, and it's an anthology of new Philippine myths. And Melissa Sipin is my co-editor and great friend who actually was not here tonight, but she is in Virginia, and it's a project that we've been working on for the past four and a half years, where we've edited and compiled a series of short fiction pieces and poems, visual art pieces that are about and inspired by Philippine myths and mythological creatures. It's been a labor of love, and it's a little surreal that it's here. But there were a lot of different hands and influences in this work. And so Edwin Lozada, the publisher, Carayan Press, helped us immensely and was instrumental in getting this book out. He has an eagle eye and was able to edit this publication and went through it went through it page by page, word by word, it feels like, and has such a careful attention to this book. And really, he was able to help us put our vision into reality. And with Melissa, she has such an incredible sense of design and a beautiful sense of curation and finding different voices for this anthology and looking for visual artists to complement the stories has been so foundational for this book. And so I'm grateful for them and for all of the storytellers in the past and the storytellers who are able to present today.
My name is David Maduli. In the anthology, I contributed a collaborative poem with the poet Hari Alluri, and it's called Resemblance. And I also have another poem in there called Santa Ana Skyscrapers. The book, for one, it shows a huge range of Filipino writers. We write in different styles, different forms. I think it's exciting and important because in a lot of ways we have to reconstruct our ancestry and our history. And, some of the things that we get from family and grandparents and parents are fragments, and then some people are no longer around. So we have to kind of go back and dig. And some of that comes from, I believe, it's embedded in our blood, in our genes. So we have to dig to find those stories within ourselves. And then we also, have to use our imagination to find who we are, where we came from, basically.
Please welcome David.
I'm going to read the poem called Resemblance that Hari Alluri, my poet brother, and I wrote. And we actually wrote this specifically for this anthology. I've been excited about this project since I first heard about it. And when I first heard about it, I called up Hari and said, hey, are you going to send something in for this? You got something? He's like, no. Do you have something? No. Then we're going to write something together. And that's what we did over the course of a month. We sent fragments back and forth and then composed it. He was in Vancouver at the time, over the phone. And so this is really kind of special in that way. So, Resemblance. The sunset hills between Our Lady of Manaoag and Minion House. Cousin sneaks us into hut below the grove. We return dizzy. Our mothers demand, where? I answer, smoking, casual, as if punishment is an imported good. Tobacco and trickster both find themselves a new descendant that day. Between Lagos Airport and Sasha Village, my Damulag self handles pigtail. Barboy longer than I was set through with bamboo. On concrete blocks, my focus off. As if I've always known the meaning of lo'ob. As if I will ever touch earth to earlobe. As if my anting is not the spit I turn among blades of fire, but the word archipelago. Offering within. Small blue crabs simmer, pinakbet, with the broth of their dreams. I crunch them whole to remember. Later on the porch, feet propped on barangay captain uncle's jeep, Ginebra San Miguel slow dances our tongues, pulls us in close, full breath, embrace, rest, tempo heavy on memory's neck. Tears, sweat, and a fish market on the Lingayen Gulf, who we are. Pangasinan, the place salt is from. Offering within, present is more. Waiwaya, I am sorry. I would have driven you home, but Tuesday in Manila, my plates are off the road. You caught jeepney across River Bridge and I was too late. Your people flew a flood over my bare feet. Without offering over feature, Lolo shapeshifted into a mud-filled rut, stamped grave deep from wheel of the Empire's Jeep, fell out of Bataan's rapids into a village emptier than his stomach, chameleoned another 24 beneath a hunched dining table till he hallucinated the California coast. That other Pacific sunset stroked his arm, smuggled him back to the death march, each boot fall under bayonet clouds, another May calling. Offering within, Batala, you are the overcast Oakland sun, glancing my wheel on MacArthur Freeway, left side, downtown curve. You are late afternoon's corncob pipe that dips into the bay, shades my heart with Perique smoke. Offering within, one theft complete. Lolo learned the story on the road to Bataan. How could Dayao, the man telling, fell before the end? Years later, when his company halted to bathe in the river, he saw Waiwaya dive in, no splash. His literate superior refused to budge, but Lolo knew the ambush would follow. Like Dayao always knew Waiwaya would go back, just didn't realize it was back to spirit. Without offering, we borrow each other. Bonifacio Tagatak, provincial warden of Ilocos Norte, my uncle, tours us through his prison grounds. The Archbishop is up from Manila, has graced us this day to say Mass. His Eminence nods across the near-empty courtyard service. Uncle whispers, well, you see, I happen to schedule his appearance same time as monthly conjugal visits. Without offering, the present is more jealous of past over future, both can be stolen, only one theft complete. We borrow each other for a little of this life to exchange blue crab dreams, gin tongue, and smoke. Today, between Cortez Island and Our Lady, the Queen of Angels of Porciuncula River, linguistics professor poses. If they never surrendered, why is it named the Cordillera? Waiwaya scrapes from her chair, each footfall to the door another storm cloud gathering to follow. Her swimmers glide down, glass hallway, column courtyard, city streets, rolling leaves between fingers to place offering on picnic bench, within mountain shadow where those men not from same barrio fracture their voices back into wisps of each other's songs. So that's that one. And so Rachel asked us to also read another piece from the book so that we can share and hear some of the other voices. And I'm excited to read a story by Isabel Garcia Gonzalez, a good friend of mine and also a great writer and teacher. She's teaching tonight, so she couldn't be here. So, and this definitely touches on one of the myths and tropes that you'll see through the book. It's called Blessed Fruit. I was not always like this, you know. I used to be like you, and sometimes I wish it were still that way. But that was many years ago, and I can barely remember the life I used to have. I remember only small things, like the way the jackfruit fell open after father cracked its spiky brown rind, slippery yellow jewels spilling out of the skin. I remember the way my mother's hand smelled after washing the clothes in the river, clean and metallic, like shiny new centavos. But that was a long time ago, and many things have changed. I am that woman in your story, but that story is not mine. People create comfort for themselves in stories about things they cannot understand. They choose comfort over truth and share their foolish stories with their children and their children's children, and the lies are passed on. Nobody believed me when I told them all of those dirty things. His trembling brown hands groping my body behind the schoolhouse. No, I did not want it. I prayed for it to stop. The rotting meat smell of his breath, panting hard. I closed my eyes, Hail Mary full of grace. The secret threat whispered hot in my ear, the Lord is with thee. Nobody believed me when I told them those dirty things. Mother's clean centavo hand struck hot against my cheek. Father turned away. The neighbors shook their heads and clucked tongues. Even the priest gave me penance for sins I did not commit or confess to. 10 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys. Blessed art thou amongst women. One night, mother found me, shirt pulled up, hands on belly, skin stretched tight over a growing mounds. That very night, my parents took me to the hilo in the mountains, paid her half a month's earnings to stop the swelling. A straw mat on the dirt floor, the old woman with no teeth, rags and towels ready for blood. The pain was sharp and slow, like so many fingernails tearing me in half, opening me up to rip out the life that clawed at the walls of my womb. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Mother wept at my side, her cold hands on my face, unable to cool the burning just beneath my skin. Father paced outside, gravel murmuring beneath his shoes. The helot mumbled as she worked, kneading my body, loosening the life inside. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb. And finally, the pain traveled through me, pushing up from my belly, gurgling in the back of my throat, squeezing behind my eyes and easing out through my scalp, sliding down every strand of hair as it left, erasing the black, which has never returned since. The Hilo ordered me to fast for 3 full days, but on the second night, I left my blood-stained bed ravenous. I crept through the window and squatted just outside, pulling at the earth, packing handfuls of soil into my mouth, tiny pebbles scraping against my tongue. But the hunger would not stop. I wandered through the village. It was silent and vast like church at dawn. I stopped at the school teacher's house, which rose above all the other houses huddled together, a bully among classmates. Longing to touch the cool sliver of moon, I climbed to the top of the school teacher's house. Longing to be light, to float off into the night sky, fly far away from here, I prayed, Holy Mary, Mother of God. But my body still sat heavy on the roof of the man with the trembling brown hands who slept peacefully next to his wife. The trembling brown hand did not quiver or shake as it rested on the peak of his wife's round belly. It moved slowly up and down in the rhythm of his wife's life-giving breath. Pray for us sinners. I tried not to think of them, their arms and legs tangled together in contented sleep. I tried not to think of my hunger, teeth and claws tearing at my insides. But that same pain from the helot shot through my body, slicing me at the womb. And with the most incredible pain, I was released. My top half became light, floated up from the roof while my bottom half still sat, heavy and earthbound. I stretched my arms out and continued to rise, the wind whipping my hair. The thick night air held my top half suspended above the village. The coconut trees whispered in the wind. The mountains slept upright in the distance. The sea licked hungrily at the shore, and the people sighed with their eyes shut tight to the world. I looked down on my village, seeing it for the first time as it truly was, as Mother Mary in heaven would see it. I turned circles in the air, weeping and laughing at the same time, mourning and relishing the growing distance between myself and my village below. Pray for us sinners. The hunger still would not stop. I tried to quiet it. I flew down to the school teacher's yard, plucking mangoes, papayas, jackfruit from his trees. I ate them furiously, sticky juices running down my chin onto my chest and between my breasts. I ate every single fruit from every single tree, but the hunger still would not stop, twisting and twisting in my insides, demanding more. I peered into the school teacher's window, hoping to quiet this hunger with something, anything from his wife's kitchen. Pray for us sinners. It was then that I knew. I knew I could not and would not quiet my hunger any longer. I let myself look upon the only thing I really wanted, the only thing that would satisfy my cravings. I swooped down on the sleeping couple, seeing the roundness, smelling the ripeness. The school teacher woke, but his wife would never wake, and watched in horror as my teeth pierced through that precious, life-giving mound. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Blood mixed with the sticky juice on my skin as I ingested that which had been taken from me. Pray for us sinners now. Before I flew out the window, I looked back at the school teacher and saw his brown hands trembling, and at the hour of our death, amen. After that night, I have never been able to return to live among people, their rules and their judgments, their small earthly lives, and I have never quieted that hunger. I am the woman in your story, but this story is mine. There are others like me. Their stories are different, but their longing the same. Maybe you will not believe their stories either, but for us, it does not matter anymore. All right. Thank you.
My name is Veronica Montez, and my contribution to the anthology is a short story called The Ones That Were Lost. I was really excited to be a part of this project. There are short stories, there's memoir, there's poetry, of course, there's visual art, and then there's such a wide range of voices. This project has inspired me to dig a little deeper because, you take a look at one myth and then you want to find others. And you just keep going, and it's endless what you can find and what you can learn. So it's definitely inspired me to learn more about my heritage.
Please welcome Veronica.
My story is about a woman who is not only lonely, but very much alone. And one of the ways that she deals with the situation is to sort of glom onto a couple of things that she remembers her Lolo, her grandfather, saying a couple of times, and sort of builds a narrative around it. So I'm just going to read a little bit from it. It's called The Ones That Were Lost. My mother had the most beautiful singing voice in all of Laguna province, her Lolo said. His fingers fluttered, his hands moved up and down in waves as if following the rise and fall of his mother's voice. The girl didn't say anything. She didn't move. He had spoken of his mother only once before, a single sentence that, if written down, amounted to just 15 words. Here they are. My mother lost my father in a hunting accident when I was just a child. And now also, my mother had the most beautiful singing voice in all of Laguna province. She made the mistake of looking at her Lolo. What? He said. What else? She asked. But he didn't answer. He never would. His stories were his alone, and she had always resented this. He spoke English and Tagalog, of course, but also Japanese and Tongan, facts she discovered when she overheard him chatting with a restaurant cook and a 7-Eleven cashier, respectively. When she asked him about this, he deflected her inquiries with his usual silence. Later, her father offered the following information free of embellishment. He lived in Japan for a while, he said, in the palace of the emperor. What? The girl said. Why? How? The emperor wanted golf lessons, her father said. He said this as if it explained everything. And he lived in Tonga, too? That's why he speaks Tongan? Oh, no, I have no idea about that. And you never asked him? What good would that do, Iha? Said the girl's father. This happened a long time ago. All her family is gone, and her hair is silvered. She lives alone and makes up stories to replace the ones that were lost, or the ones that were never shared, or never happened, or never will. Moments before she hit the water, her wings released and landed gently on the ground beside a tangle of wild sampaguita. She would find them later, as she always did, and roll them about in the small white flowers. In this way, the smell of the earth would remain with her when she took her place once again in the night sky. With half-closed eyes, the moon, hanging low and heavy, watched as the sister stars bathed. They sang together, their voices rich with happiness. Not too long, said the moon, its voice languorous and deep. Not too long. The stars laughed and washed their hair and ignored the moon. They pulled mud from the bottom of the lake and painted stripes on each other's faces. They floated on their backs, staring up at the sky and noting with amused alarm their own absence. In this way, the whole of the night passed. Unbeknownst to the stars and to the moon, a hunter was making his way home through the forest, his head bowed in disappointment. For his day had been unsuccessful. He had nothing to show for his efforts, nothing at all. But then he heard the sweet bell voices of the sister stars and raised his head to see the surface of the lake churning with their movements. He edged close to the water and hid amongst the tall grasses. The man couldn't believe his luck when the sister stars emerged from the water naked, their skin pale and lit within like 1,000 paper lanterns. They quickly donned their wings and ascended. The man, whose name is unimportant, unfurled from his position and saw that a star of great beauty had been left behind. She moved quickly around the perimeter of the lake, searching for something lost. The hunter saw what she was looking for. He saw the wings. They lay a few footsteps away beside some sampaguita flowers, trembling as they waited for the star maiden to claim them. The hunter snatched them up and folded them into the bag he wore slung across his body. He felt the wings flutter half-heartedly like those of a bird long trapped. When he stepped out to greet the maiden star, she crouched like an animal and drew her long ropes of hair about her body to shield her nakedness. But then the hunter's dog loped gently towards her and nuzzled her hand, and she grew bold and stood at her full height while the muscles in her back tensed and released, tensed and released. She followed the hunter all the way to town where they stopped at his sister's door. Without saying a word, the sister brought out a length of woven cloth, which the star maiden wrapped around herself. "Thank you," she whispered. The sister looked at the hunter and shook her head. She closed the door just as the star maiden was about to speak. In the early years of their marriage, she would sometimes disappear to the lake where the hunter had found her, but eventually the disapproving frowns of the village women became too much to bear. Saan ka ba? They asked. Where are you going? I've lost something, she answered. Well, what is it? We can help you. But she hurried off, pretending not to hear them. The women made excuses to sidle up to her when she returned from these trips, taking note of her unkempt appearance. They whispered to each other furiously, their eyes alight with the possibility of scandal. Why was there dirt beneath her fingernails? Why was her face streaked with tears? Why, though she was standing right in front of them, did she never seem to be there? So that's just part of it. Thank you. And now I'm super excited because I get to read from Dean Francis Alfar's story, The Maiden and the Crocodile, which is a wonderful story, which I love for so many reasons, one of which is that he writes it's written backwards chronologically. So I'm just going to read the first section and the last section. The first section is the beginning and the end. It's called The Maiden and the Crocodile. She kissed him one last time, failing to notice how the roughness of his skin slowly began to turn to the soft, lost flesh of his youth, and he realized that it was all he could do, not to cry. And she stood up without a word, with neither gasp nor sigh, and picked her way through the deepening shadows, his heart in her hand, leaving him to die alone. He thought, perhaps too kindly, that it was her way of leaving him a degree of dignity, a painful measure of kindness that nonetheless cut deep into the place where his heart once dwelt. And finally, when he felt the last of his strength give way, when there was not a scale or snout or tooth or claw left of him, but only a man's dying body, he sighed. His dismal human eyes wept no crocodile tears, but tears as dry as rivers and as dim as stars. And now the end, that's also the beginning. They first met through glances, his unblinking and half submerged in the river, hers guileless and drowning in the color of mud. He was surprised to see a young woman so near his home. Only the hopeless or the foolish or the brave ever came to him, and most of the time it was to win his heart, which they believed could work miracles. She, of course, had come to do exactly that, for the emptiness in her bosom was as dry as rivers and as dim as stars. Thank you.
My name is Barbara Jane Reyes, and I wrote a poem called Aswang. The way that these stories have very deeply become a part of who we are as a people is through so much retelling and retelling and retelling. And so those stories start to really define who we are as a people, what we believe, what our worldview is, and something about our deep belief system and things that are so much older than Christianity. So, that's very much tied to the land and what was there before us. To be a part of a book that has this kind of this real enthusiastic reception from the community. This is subject matter that they're all very interested in and invested in, stuff that they've grown up with their entire lives, and I'm just in awe of that.
Please welcome Barbara.
The first story I'm going to read is written by a storyteller and writer, Rebecca Mabanglo Mayor, who lives up in a town called Bellingham in Washington State. And what I mean by storyteller is that she's taken to the art of performing story. Not spoken word, not slam, but actual indigenous storytelling. So it's an honor to be able to read her piece. She also teaches in a Native American school, and the story Falling from the Sky, has the myth of the woman who falls to earth, which is also a story that exists in the Ojibwe Native American myths. So that's really interesting how it's come to exist both there on another continent and here, in North America. Falling from the Sky. In the before times, say the elders of Bohol, there was no land, only endless sea, and the people lived in a great kingdom in the clouds. They were ruled by a datu who had a beautiful daughter. The datu ruled wisely and carefully, and everyone loved the little girl who played in the great forests and fields held in the sky by clouds. One day, though, the datu's daughter became sick with a fever. Her skin burned hot as the sun, while her body shook like thunder and perspired like a terrible rainstorm, soaking her bedclothes. She refused to eat, and every day she became thinner and thinner. No herb or chant could cure the girl, and the datu feared she would die. What should I do to save her? The datu asked the babaylan, the kingdom healers. They looked at each other, their brows wrinkled with worry, for all their knowledge and prayers had failed. Finally, the eldest babaylan stepped forward and bowed low to the datu. There is only one more thing you should try, the babaylan said. She must touch the finest roots at the base of the sacred balete tree. The power of the tree is strongest at the root. If the balete cannot cure her, nothing will. Waking and sleeping were the same thing in the maternity ward of Kapiolani Medical Center. It was hard to tell whether I had fallen asleep or just blinked my eyes. Beside me, my husband Kel dozed in the pink vinyl chair that he had unfolded into a recliner after our late dinner. Behind the curtain to my left, my roommate snored softly, while outside our room I heard the shuffle of nurses doing their rounds. Time passed unevenly. The sweep of the minute hand on the wall clock jerked and paused. 10 minutes felt like 20. An hour felt like 2 minutes. Somewhere around midnight, I began disbelieving the movement of the clock hands. What does a mother do when the laboring is done but her child is nowhere to be seen or held? Less than 12 hours earlier, I had unexpectedly given birth to a girl we named Ligaya. In the neonatal intensive care unit of the hospital, she laid in an incubator while nurses routinely checked her vitals. Born 8 weeks too early, they would be vigilant for any sign of trouble. Maybe she slept. Maybe she opened her eyes to watch the strange, round, glowing light above her as it shifted in and out of her focus. Maybe she felt her fingers against her chin as her limbs moved of their own accord. She had no sense of time either, I suspected, but lacking any experience at all, she likely took it all in as one single moment. I was the one struggling to make sense of time and space. The yellow taxi, the scent of disinfectant, the clatter of metal instruments against metal trays, bright examination lights, all those moments adding up to a night in a hospital room where time tightened around pain, then loosened again around worried thoughts. How long had we been in Honolulu now? How long had it been since we left the little town of Moscow on the western border of Idaho? If my mind had been clear, my body rested, I would have remembered, but there had been no time to rest. We had arrived in Hawaii only 8 days before, after leaving the mainland, so my husband could attend graduate school at the University of Hawaii. With more time, I would have remembered handling the keys to our house to renters, closing the doors of our storage unit, and saying goodbye to our friends and family who wished us well on our adventure. But in the dimly lit hospital room, I could only ask myself why we had left home, if what waited for us in Hawaii was all going to be like morning of terror, like we had just experienced. Moscow was a comfortably confining small town surrounded by wheat and pea fields, where winters were frosted with ice and summers baked yellow-brown with dusk. We had lived in a turn-of-the-century house with white siding and an ancient apple tree out back. Our friends joined us last summer beneath that apple tree to recite A Midsummer Night's Dream during a picnic lunch. Other friends sold used books and lived in a renovated schoolhouse. Family lived close enough to visit after a day's drive, but far enough away to fondly miss them between visits. I couldn't help but wonder if we had stayed in that small town, perhaps Ligaya would have been born closer to her due date. If my heart had been calmer instead of tight with worry for our not quite 4-pound daughter, I would have remembered why we left. Kel and I didn't leave because Moscow was a terrible place to live. We left because we wanted a different kind of life, where Kel was accepted to the Chinese Studies graduate program at UH. We fell in love with the idea of living our dreams in paradise. Life in Moscow was steady and predictable, sturdy like the basalt that rimmed each hill surrounding the town. And I felt myself, like basalt, slowly but steadily crystallizing under the pressure of routine secretarial work, punctuated by the occasional writing class. Like a boulder rolling down the steep Lewiston grade to the Snake River. Once we had set our sights on Honolulu, nothing, not even pregnancy, could stop us from moving. It seemed like such a good idea at the time. Be audacious, live your dreams, and everything will turn out rosy. Wasn't that the story I'd heard before? When I was a child, my parents told me that I could be anything I wanted as long as I worked hard and was a good person. What does that story even mean after months of planning, yard sales, box packing, and a flight that took me away from nearly everyone I knew and every place I cared about? Giving birth early wasn't in the bargain. We wanted our child to be adventurous like us, willing to take her dreams seriously and throw every bit of herself into making those dreams come true. She should have seen it. We should have seen it as a fever, a tropical fever that settled into our minds, made us blind to the comforts we had created for ourselves back in Idaho. Maybe then we would have seen the cautions in the old Filipino folktale about the girl who fell from the sky. It was a story I read the spring before we moved to Honolulu. The story was in a slim book of folk tales I bought from a vendor at an Asian Studies conference we attended. At the time, I thought it was just a story, a trace of a time long gone. At the center of the kingdom, the great balete tree reached toward the stars with great branches thick with green leaves. Its roots tightly held the dirt on the top of the clouds so no wind would topple it. The Datu's daughter would play in and around the gnarled trunk in the days before her illness. It was fitting that the great tree would help the girl heal. The Datu ordered that a hole be dug at the base of the balete tree. Workers far and wide came with their shovels, digging the dirt away from the trunk of the tree, then deepening the hole so the roots were revealed. The Datu ordered the workers to dig deeper so the fine roots of the balete tree could be seen. When they were done, the Datu lifted his daughter from her bed and tied a rope around the girl's waist. "I will lower you down," he said to his daughter. "When you see the balete tree's finest roots, touch them and you will be healed. Then I will bring you back up again." The Datu gently lowered the girl into the hole, but the workers had dug the hole too deeply and they pierced the clouds. The fingertips of the Datu's daughter brushed the deepest roots of the tree, and she was instantly healed of her fever. She felt warm instead of cold. Her body no longer shook and sweated. Her muscles felt strong instead of weak. For the first time in months, she smiled. But the girl was so thin from the fever, she slipped out of the rope loop. She fell from the sky kingdom down toward the deep ocean far below. "Father," she called, "I'm cured." She looked up, but instead of seeing her father's eyes welcoming her home, she saw the gaping hole in the sky, and she realized she was falling toward the sea. The Datu's daughter struggled to grab the rope that had slipped from her waist, but she was falling too fast. Her mouth opened, and she screamed, "Help me." There's much more of this story to read, so I hope you'll pick up the book and do so. I will read my poem, real original title. It's called Aswang. And I became really interested in the aswang, certainly as the ferocious baby-eating creature, but just her origin started to become very interesting to me in terms of, when did she become an aswang? How does one become an aswang? So I did a little bit of reading and found that it was those babaylans, it was those women healers and leaders who, the Spanish weren't really having that, women in charge and things. And so they had to, kind of create their own PR campaign of maligning these women who, were obviously very, very powerful. And they were like, well, if they're powerful, clearly they're monsters. Aswang. I am the dark-hued bitch. See how wide my blood moon eyes, and by daylight see the tangles and knots of my riverine hair. I am the bad daughter, the freedom fighter, the shaper of death masks. I am the snake. I am the crone. I am the caretaker of these ancient trees. I am the wing, tick, 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 tick. I'm close, and from under the floorboards, the grunting black pig, cool in the dirt, mushrooms between my toes. I wait. I am the encroaching wilderness, the bowels of these mountains. I am the opposite of your blessed womb. I am your inverted mirror. Guard your unborn children. Burn me with your seed and salt. Upend me, bend my body, cleave me beyond function, blame me. Thank you all very much.
Please welcome MG.
I begin with Eileen Tabios's poem, The Creation Diptych. 1. Maganda begins. Maganda is not just a Tagalog word that means beautiful. Maganda is also the name of the first woman in a Filipino creation myth. My love, if words can reach whatever world you suffer in, listen. I have things to tell you. At this muffled end to another year, I prowl somber streets, holding you in my head, this violence. A violet gaze, you with dusk. Arrives rain drifting aslant like premature memory. Am I the one who suddenly cleared these streets? My love, all our hours are curfew hours. What I offer is this dying fish into whose gullet I have thrust my thumb. Why did you lose all alleluias? My love, listen. That's just the first part. And this is an excerpt from a longer piece entitled From No There. To define the perimeter of this body, the spine from here to there occurs as a series of prepositions. The desire to run betwixt emerges as folded space. More on this later. Further associations on women to be investigated while the possibility of walking remains viable. To inhabit the landscape of the fairy tale today begins in reverse. A convex to a pre-howling. In dreams, the women occur as sound. Whack, whack, whack. The cry of a night bird in the jungle becomes louder even from a distance. I hurry to belong to this place. A hut leans at the edge of a coconut grove with windows that do not close, which simply means you can see the stars in Auntie's house at night. A3. Outside Auntie's house, red ants gather in rows, their compound eyes breaking sight, much like a kaleidoscope. Seeing movement better than shape, notice the way light filters through appendages, seeping into braided fronds, its roof walls re-arriving. Cousins plead, come follow, I must find shoes. Bilis, they shout. I hurry to belong to this place where the red horizon stretches from Auntie's yard to the sea. I follow their voices until I can no longer walk. Red ants eat at chubby folds of leg, through panties, through its soft cotton. I stop in the coconut field high in the bent light of canopy, only to see cousins laughing, pointing, Kana, Kana, Kana. Can be distinguished from humans by bloodshot eyes. When father died, mother sat corpse-side for 7 days until he was buried to guard against modified forelings appearing, wings oil-slicked, so black, resembling purple. A4, changes with the seasons, wet then dry, obeys. Reads newspaper by stacking neatly against the hearth on top of others, capsizes on vowels. Through bending trees, hears the whistling of prepositions, whereas we watch light, a sea of vertical orange bent, stacked at market or eaten in palms of hands that fold into crevices, into the grove, into dusty hands, into the jungle's potholed surface, now split in two. The cry of a night bird in the jungle becomes louder even from a distance. Mother tells me this is to create confusion, stuffing salt into our pockets. Whack, whack, whack. Thank you.
My name is Amy Suzara, and I contributed a story in one sentence called Lupa. Being a part of the project really had me examine sort of the lack of mythologies that I felt I was surrounding myself with, and it actually helped me revisit that. The first discoveries I had with ideas like the spirits that walking outside at noon and saying tabipo, tabipo, and maybe the idea that little animals that were around us might be spirits, that sort of thing that got introduced to me when I visited the Philippines for the first time. That sort of was something I got to revisit and realize that even though I got introduced late in the game when I was already about 17 or so, it influenced me in some way. I think when you pick up Kuwento, Lost Things, you're going to feel like you're capturing stories that cover a lot of generations, because some of the writers actually have, talk about their own ancestors, and then there are also stories that people are inventing. And so I think a selling point is that you're going to cover a span of Filipinos and Filipino Americans that have a very unique experience of Filipino myths. Some of us maybe, only got fragments here and there, and some people might have grown up with them their whole lives. And so it's the whole book as a whole is sort of all of us grappling with memory and the lack of certain memories and the piecing together of different things that for us may have been lost. And so through the book, it is sort of a collection of things that we have found for ourselves.
Please welcome Amy.
So I'm just going to read the very first section of Angel de la Luna and the Fifth Glorious Mystery on page 80, if anyone's reading. And I wanted to read this. I was really excited to have the opportunity because I really adore Evelina's work and also this book. And it has a lot to do with Lolas and elders and sort of healers and a lot of stuff that so happens to match the one that I wrote in some strange way. So I'll just read the first section. Lola Ani is the color of eggplant. She lies so still in her hospital bed, I must press my ear to her chest and listen for a long time before I hear her heart. It is a faint and subtle thumping. And the breathing. The breathing is so low I must hold my own breath still to feel the air moving through her frail body. When I place my hand on hers, she does not hold on, she does not move. She is so blue, I think maybe it is the dim light of the room that colors her skin this way. It is not. The blue and purple shades tumble across her arms, her chest, her forehead and legs, stretching and pooling in its intensity. I know they are bruises. At first, Lola Ani is all I see. I don't even hear Lila weeping in the corner of the room. Her cry is soft and low and constant, like one of the machines that Lola Ani is hooked up to. I whisper in Lola's ear. I sing a little song to her, the one she used to sing to me when I was little and too makulit to settle down and rest. It is a song about rice paddies and little girls and birds. Does she remember? I ask her. Does she hear me? I don't tell her what I'm really thinking. I should have been with them tonight, making my way to the house too. Friday night. I should have been with her and my little sister. Maybe they wouldn't have bothered her. Maybe I could have fought back. I won't leave you again, I tell her. I won't do that. I don't care what Inay says. I don't care how disrespectful they think I am. I will not leave you again. I whisper so many prayers in Lola Ani's ear. I say them so fast that I'm sure she will think back on this night and swear to me that angels had come to her, had sung to her, had brought her to the very breath of God. And I will say, it was me, Lola Ani, your apo. It was an angel, yes, but it was me, Angel de la Luna. I can already hear her laughing and telling me to be quiet, to take her seriously. Totoo yon, she'll say. Maraming angel with beautiful voices and soft faces. The tears are falling fast and they wet everything, make all the vision so blurry, make the blue and purple swirls on Lola Ani's skin shift and turn and seep into my own brown body. I don't notice that at some point, Lila has come to the bedside and collapsed right on top of me, her arms holding me, weeping too, wetting my hair and shirt with her tears. We stay like that for a long time, the three of us lying one on top of the other, with Karina sitting in one of those hospital chairs, scribbling more revolutionary love poems onto paper towels. So you very much get a glimpse that probably makes you want to read the whole book, which you should. Not only the whole excerpt. Okay. I feel like I'm bending down slightly. Okay. So I'm going to read my piece. And for better or for worse, it is missing the last line. And I actually recovered it. I lost things on my phone. And so it's an interesting thing to see it. At first I was like, oh my God. And then now I'm like, well, it's interesting that it's to be continued in this weird way, like never ending story. I'll read, it's really just like a phrase that got removed, but fortunately I can read it and you can write it down if you want. Fill in the blank. Okay. A modern day myth in one sentence is, because it was part of a writing workshop and I wish I could remember what the workshop was. I will at some point. It was I think we were asked to just free write and it might have been a one sentence, but somehow this is actually a story I had written previously at least one other time. So it was sort of like, kind of like a dream, part of a dream. And then it came back again. And this is it. So it's sort of like, I guess, is that how myths get created or folklore? It sort of like felt like something that just came through me and I was a little bit like, where do these people come from? Although Lola Remy is the name of, I'll dedicate it to my Lola Remy, who is my grandfather's sister and she passed away last year. Lupa, a modern day myth in one sentence. And she was the one who listened on the wind even when Lola Remy said, "That is nonsense. How can you hear voices when the wind blows in the mango trees and the ocean crashes upon the shore at Bagasbas?" She said, "Do not go outside at noontime, dahil that is a time when the spirits are most active, all of them, Diwata, Aswang, Multo, Anino, and those who have recently passed. So if you must step into the mango grove, say, tabipo, tabipo, to ask them permission, to honor them before you intrude. But even so," said Lola Remy, "it is not safe to go near the balete tree. It might take you in." But even hearing this, the black-eyed girl knew that the balete tree was exactly where she would go. It was calling her name after all. Her name was Mary Lou, but being 8, she thought that was boring and always heard something tugging at her left ear, Lupa, and in her dreams, this is what she called herself. So Lupa one day tiptoed outside at noon and Lola Remy was not looking as she was scaling the bangus in the sink, the clay stove crackling its wood in the outdoor kitchen. Lupa listened carefully on the wind and heard her name in her own voice, "Lupa, Lupa," and then it changed. It became the small barking of a little dog and returned to her own voice again. Lupa followed these sounds in bare feet, wide soles clambering over roots and branches, and she followed and followed, muttering, tabi po, all the way along the way, and she thought she felt bones underfoot and the angled finger joints of the dead tugging under her collar this way and that, like she had read the forest did to Snow White when she ran through it. The Anino had many messages and many stories if she would only stop, and Lupa, who was 8 years old but also 800 in spirit years, knew that there would be time for this later or next lifetime, and so she smoothed her slim brown hands over the knuckled bones that were seen by only her and said, Teka muna, and be patient. She hopped and stumbled, careful not to crush the butiki underfoot, which tickled her to stay and listen to its stories, and the red and the brown tutubi, which bumbled and swerved in front of her face to sprinkle story dust on her nose, and the little blue damselflies which landed on her shoulders. But she said, Hintayan mo ako, there will be time for this, just wait. And so Lupa finally arrived at the clearing. Before her sprawled a majestic, massive-trunked, many-armed, monstrous balete tree that was so dignified and so grotesque all at once, with its veins and sinews knotted and creeping this way and that. Lupa stood with her mouth agape and saw the little black dog sitting there in the center, barking a little sound, inviting her to come forth, its black eyes so round like hers. Her eyes fixed on the dog, she felt the balete pulling her in by her waist as though there was an invisible cord there, wrapped around her. And so she closed her gleaming black eyes and allowed herself to be pulled in and in until she forgot herself, and the voices became louder, and she forgot herself. And Lupa was never found since. But some say they hear her voice on the wind or see her eyes in the many-eyed dragonfly. Some say they feel her thick eyelashes on their shoulders when the damselfly passes by. Some see her in the eyes of a puppy abandoned by the road, and so they take it in rather than let it wander alone. And they know that Lupa has become the quick-moving butiki tickling over and under the soles of her feet as they tread the barren mango grove, muttering, tabi po, tabi po.
So you can purchase your own copy of Kuwento Lost Things by visiting the website, kuwento.carayanpress.com. You can also search for Kuwento Lost Things on Facebook. And the book is $15. So I hope you can purchase it, and please feel free to share it with your friends. A cousin of mine named Rico Reyes actually did a portrait of me and as aswang, and she has wings, so she's like So imagine these sleeves as wings.